Have you ever wanted to work customer service? I didn't think so. In fact, I think everyone who works customer service is living their own personal hell, so remember, don't be a dick to the people serving you. But that latter part is just kind of beside the point, because today's anime is all about customer service. Kinda. Okay, not really. Catch Me at the Ballpark is a baseball anime that surprisingly has less to do with baseball than it does with the gyaru serving beer in the stands. As a workplace comedy about a server girl, it doesn't particularly have a plot, so all I can really say about this one is that the idea is a bunch of random events all set inside a baseball stadium. So in as far as the anime goes, I don't really find this one to be particularly special. Though I honestly think my opinion on this matter should be taken with a bit of a grain of salt because I'm not really the ideal demographic for this one. I have no attachment to sports ball, the idea of a bunch of sweaty athletic dudes chasing balls of various size around an open field has never quite been my thing. So an anime centered heavily on baseball wasn't likely to be a huge hit with me unless it was something more along the lines of Blue Box, or at least the first half of that show, or Medalist. All that to say, effectively, sports anime are very rarely my thing. This one, though, is much more a workplace rom-com rather than a focused sports anime on baseball, with several sets of main characters rather than focusing specifically on one or two of them. If you're familiar with the likes of Surazure Children, it has a very similar style to that. The characters in this aren't awful. If anything, I would say they're largely just okay. Many of them lack any sort of backstory or real character work to support them the way I generally like to see. Though there is a caveat with this anime hardly supporting that kind of structure. Still, not many of them have some amazing hook that makes me excited to see them around. They aren't particularly compelling. They're lacking in singularity, something to really make them stand out. Ruriko is the closest we'll get to a main character in this show, the one who shows up the most on screen. She's a gyaru who works as a beer girl in the stands, but has a largely hard time socializing with other people, and puts up a front to make it seem like she's less anxious than she actually is. And there's not really much else to note outside of that. The other main, an office worker with no name as of yet, I don't know where I got that from. He's named twice. His name is Murata. I'm stupid. Is really only around to enjoy the game and get teased by Ruriko every time he wants to buy a beer. Then there's the wife of one of the older players on the home team who is a decent comedy routine most times, a couple of straight-laced security guards, a silent mascot, a love-stricken announcer, and there are a bunch of others as well who are largely more forgettable than the ones I've mentioned here. But all far too many to have any real meaningful depth to a character arc. But like I said, this isn't really a show built on its characters, but rather its setting. And as I've stated previously, I do want good characters to make me care about all the stuff that's happening, but not every show is going to revolve around the kind of things I like, because not everything is made for me. And this is one of those shows. It isn't super focused on making compelling characters, but rather on replicating an experience. To steal some words from someone else, it's almost like the stadium itself is the main character rather than anyone else. So that is strike one in my book. The characters fall short of making me actually care about them. Which brings us to comedy, the other big part of this. There are some genuinely funny and enjoyable bits to it, particularly the bento battle in episode 5 where the wife of one player and the girlfriend of another decide to spend unnecessary amounts of money on bento boxes just to support their man. I genuinely did like this bit. It was funny to watch them unnecessarily compete with each other to try and make sure that their boyfriend/husband isn't the one who has sold the least at the stands, but ultimately it was pointless because people weren't selecting them based on the players on the box, but rather than the actual contents of the food, so they quickly realized the error of their ways. Especially after realizing that they had more food than they were ever going to be able to consume. But there are other times where I'm really not at all interested in what the show is doing, like the introduction of Dennis Young, an American player hoping to impress the scouts in the stadium and make it back to the American leagues. Between the story surrounding it and the voice acting involved of a Japanese man trying to speak English like an American, I just couldn't stomach it. It was hard to watch, and I found it largely cringeworthy and it made me kind of want to start skipping ahead as that section was progressing. Comedy in this show can be dodgy at best. Sometimes you get a really good one. Sometimes you get a segment that just isn't all that entertaining, and sometimes you get a terribly cliche one at that. So that is strike two. Now, it may not all be foul balls, but the fact that this show isn't batting closer to 100 kinda makes it a bummer to watch at times. Puns aside, you'll be hard-pressed to get me to recommend this anime to anyone. Really, its demographic is going to be anyone who is a baseball fan who enjoys going to the stadium to see their team play. If that's you, you may actually connect with a lot of the things happening in this show, as I imagine they may just be regular experiences for anyone who's a Ballpark regular. I can imagine that its primary audience would be people like that. So I guess there is some level of charm to it, even if it isn't for me. It simulates a somewhat authentic Ballpark experience and triggers a bit of nostalgia, much the same way I feel about certain gaming anime. All things considered, it's not an abomination of a show like some others this season are, and is genuinely a well-structured anime for what it's worth. But it really doesn't do anything super special that makes me think that it is a grand slam. All in all, it's just kind of there. And while I did enjoy the bento box, this one is still treading dangerous water for me, and I may just drop it within the next couple of episodes. All it has done is buy itself some time.